I've always believed that family means showing up, even when it's inconvenient. That's what I taught my son, Daniel, ever since he was little. Christmas was always our time. The smell of cinnamon rolls baking before sunrise, the faint crackle of the fireplace, the way he'd run down the stairs in his pajamas when he was small, clutching that little stuffed bear I gave him the day his father left. It was always just the two of us, and somehow that was enough. I raised Daniel alone after his father decided he needed space. Space, as if family was something you could step out of like a room when it got too warm. But I made peace with it. I worked 2 jobs, scrimped and saved, and somehow managed to buy a small house, one that became our sanctuary. Daniel grew up in those rooms. He learned to walk in that kitchen, did his homework at that dining table, and had his first heartbreak sitting on the front porch, telling me, "I'll never love anyone again." And then he met Melissa. She was pretty, soft-spoken, polite, always smiling. At first, I liked her. I really did. She seemed to make him happy, and that's all a mother really wants for her child. But slowly, that warm smile of hers began to feel performative, like she was always calculating how she looked, how she sounded, how people saw her. I remember the first Christmas she joined us. I cooked all day. Daniel's favorite pot roast, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. I even set the table with the fancy plates I only brought out for holidays. Melissa came in wearing a glittery dress, carrying a store-bought cheesecake and that fake, perfect smile. She said, "Oh, you didn't have to cook so much. We could have just ordered in." I laughed it off, but I saw Daniel glance at her, the kind of glance that said, "Please don't embarrass me." It stung, not because of what she said, but because for the first time, my son looked at me like I was the problem. Over the next few years, things changed. Phone calls became shorter. Visits are less frequent. I used to be the first person Daniel called when he got promoted or had news. Now, I found out about his life through Facebook posts Melissa shared with captions like, "So proud of my husband." When they bought their first house, with my help, I thought things might get better. I'd lent them the down payment and co-signed the mortgage. I even transferred part of my savings because Daniel promised he'd pay me back within a year. It wasn't about the money. It was about helping him build his future. I told him, "I want you to have what I never did, stability, a home, a foundation." He hugged me tight that day. "I'll never forget this, Mom," he said. "You're the reason we have this." But people forget, especially when comfort comes too easily. Last Christmas, I started preparing early. I bought Daniel's favorite brand of whiskey, wrapped presents for both of them, and even made stockings with their initials embroidered. I'd been counting down the days. I kept checking the weather app, hoping for snow, because Daniel always loved white Christmases. Then 2 weeks before Christmas, I called him to ask what time they'd be coming over. Melissa answered. "Hi, sweetie," I said cheerfully. "Just wondering if you guys are coming on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day this year." There was a pause. Then her voice softened, too soft. "Oh, actually, we're spending Christmas with my parents this year. They're flying in from Florida." I blinked. "Oh, I didn't know. When did that happen?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, it was kind of last minute."
Like, subscribe, and comment below this video for the next story.
You know how things go, but we'll definitely see you soon, okay? When I asked if I could drop by to give them their gifts, she hesitated. "Actually, we'll be pretty busy. Maybe after the holidays?" That night, I called Daniel directly. He didn't pick up. When he finally called back the next evening, his tone was clipped. "Mom, please don't make this a big deal," he said. "It's just Christmas. Just Christmas." I repeated, trying not to sound hurt. "You've spent every Christmas with me for 30 years. "I know," he sighed, "but things are different now. Melissa's parents rarely get to see her. We'll make it up to you next year." Next year. He said it so easily, like years were endless, like promises didn't age. I hung up politely, wished him well, and told him to drive safely. Then I sat there in the quiet, surrounded by the half-wrapped presents, the garland, the lights twinkling against the window. I hadn't felt that kind of emptiness since the day his father left. The days leading up to Christmas were unbearable. Every commercial, every song on the radio felt like a cruel reminder. I baked anyway, out of habit, maybe. The smell of sugar cookies filled the kitchen, but without laughter, without Daniel sneaking bites of dough. It just felt wrong. On Christmas Eve, I sat by the window watching the snow fall. My neighbor's house across the street was glowing with warmth, kids running around, people laughing, someone playing piano. And there I was, a mother with gifts under a tree no one would open. At midnight, I poured myself a glass of wine and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daniel." Then, for the first time in my life, I didn't call him. I didn't send a text. I let the silence sit. A few days later, I saw their photos online. Melissa had posted an entire album, Christmas in Florida with family. There they were, Daniel smiling ear to ear, wearing a matching sweater with Melissa and her parents, standing in front of a palm tree wrapped in lights. Not one word about me, not even a Merry Christmas text. Something inside me cracked, not from anger, but from realization. For years, I had been the one holding all the threads together. I'd sacrificed, supported, paid, worried, and loved unconditionally. But love shouldn't be one-sided. I thought back to the mortgage, to my savings. My name is still tied to their home, to every bill, every favor, every time I said, "Don't worry, I'll cover it." I had given Daniel everything, and in return, he had given me distance. That week, I made a decision I never imagined I would. It wasn't out of spite. It was out of clarity. I walked into the bank, asked to speak to the loan officer, and said, "I want to withdraw my name from this mortgage." The woman blinked, surprised. "You're the co-signer, ma'am. If you remove yourself, the loan will need to be refinanced or paid off." I nodded calmly. "That's fine. I just don't want any ties anymore." She hesitated. "You do realize this could affect their payment terms?" I looked her in the eye and said, "I do." That night, I slept better than I had in months. When Daniel found out 2 weeks later, he called in a panic. "Mom, what did you do?" he demanded. "The bank said you canceled your part of the mortgage. Now they're saying we have to refinance or lose the house." I kept my voice even. "Daniel, I told you years ago. The house was my gift to help you start your life, but I didn't give it so you could forget I exist." He sighed harshly. "So this is punishment? Because we didn't come for Christmas." "It's not punishment," I said quietly. "It's perspective. You've built a life where I don't belong. I'm simply stepping out of it." There was silence on the line. Then he muttered, "I can't believe you'd do this to me." I closed my eyes. "I can't believe you'd leave me alone on Christmas." He hung up. I expected guilt, maybe regret. But what came instead was peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't waiting for scraps of love. I'd taken back something, not just financial, but emotional control. Over the following weeks, he didn't call. Melissa, of course, made a Facebook post about toxic parents and setting boundaries. I didn't respond. I just kept quiet, baking, reading, taking walks, rediscovering myself outside the title of mom. And yet, even as I found peace, a small ache lingered. Because no matter what had happened, he was still my son. And no matter how strong I wanted to be, I still checked my phone every night, hoping for a message, a sign that maybe he understood. It didn't come. Not yet. 3 weeks passed after Daniel hung up on me. The silence between us was colder than any winter wind. At first, I thought he'd call. He always did. Whenever we fought, whether it was about curfews when he was 16 or his decision to move in with Melissa too fast, he'd sulk for a few days and then show up at my door with that sheepish grin and a "you were right, Mom." But this time, nothing. No calls, no texts, not even a like on my Facebook posts where I'd been carefully pretending everything was fine, sharing photos of my garden, the new book I was reading, my cat sleeping by the window. Until one evening, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there. But it wasn't my Daniel. His face was tight, his eyes tired. He looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Mom," he said flatly, "can I come in?" I stepped aside, wordless. He didn't sit down. He just stood in the living room, looking around as if the place was suddenly unfamiliar. Maybe it was. He hadn't been there in almost a year. "I just came from the bank," he started, voice clipped. "They said since you pulled out of the loan, our refinance isn't going through. The payments are going up." "I see," I said calmly. "Did you talk to a financial advisor?" He frowned. Mom, this isn't funny. We could lose the house. I met his eyes. Daniel, you bought that house to start your own life. I simply helped you begin it. If keeping it depends on me staying tied to it, maybe it's time you ask yourself whether it was ever really yours. He ran a hand through his hair. You're punishing me. No, I said softly. I'm letting go. You stopped needing me. Now you'll have a chance to prove it. He scoffed bitterly. You think you're teaching me some kind of lesson? You're just being cruel. His words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. Cruel, I repeated quietly. Cruel was sitting alone on Christmas with a table full of food I made for you. Cruel was seeing you in photos with someone else's mother while mine sat empty. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. His jaw tightened, his eyes glassy. Then he muttered, "You've changed," and stormed out. When the door shut, I stood there in the silence again, the same silence that had become my companion. But this time I didn't cry, because deep down I knew something was shifting. The weeks turned into months. I got used to my quiet mornings, tea by the window, crossword puzzles, the occasional walk with my neighbor, Janice. Every once in a while, I'd hear bits of gossip from Janice, who seemed to know everything happening in town. Did you hear, she said one morning, that young couple on Maple Street, the one with the blue shutters, they've been having financial trouble. Something about their mortgage rates going up. I simply nodded, stirring my tea. Yes, I heard. She sighed. It's sad. They looked so happy when they first moved in. Happy. That word always came up with Daniel and Melissa. Happy photos, happy captions, happy smiles. But happiness built on an image never lasts long. One Saturday afternoon, I was pruning my roses when a car pulled up in front of my house. Melissa stepped out. Even dressed in designer clothes, she looked exhausted, her hair messy, her eyes rimmed red. Can we talk? She asked, arms folded tightly across her chest. I hesitated. Of course. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where she'd once made polite small talk while scrolling through her phone. She looked around, maybe realizing for the first time how much life had been lived in this small, cozy house. Daniel won't talk to you, she started. He's angry, but I think he's scared. Scared? I repeated. She nodded. The refinance didn't go through. He's behind on payments. He doesn't want me to tell you, but he's drowning, Mrs. Larkin. I leaned back, feeling that old ache stir in my chest. How much behind? 2 months, she said quietly. And I think he maxed out one of his credit cards trying to make it work. I took a deep breath. And you? What are you doing about it? Her eyes flickered. I'm trying, but my job's been slow and I stopped her gently. Melissa, I'm not judging, but let me ask you something. When you both decided to spend Christmas without me, did you realize how deeply it would hurt him later? She looked startled. What do you mean? Daniel has always wanted to please the people he loves, I said. You ask him to choose. He'll choose peace, even if it breaks his heart. I didn't cancel that mortgage to destroy him. I did it to make him stand on his own. But now I wonder if either of you ever understood what standing alone really means. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to come between you two. I smiled sadly. Maybe not. But sometimes, distance doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from comfort. She looked down. I should go, she whispered. As she stood, I said softly, Melissa, tell Daniel I still love him, even if he can't love me right now. Her eyes filled with tears. I will. And she left. Weeks passed again. Spring melted the snow. The tulips bloomed along the fence, and life went on quietly. Until one morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. It wasn't in an envelope, just a folded piece of paper, the handwriting unmistakably Daniel's. Mom, I don't know where to start. I was angry, furious, even when you pulled your name from the mortgage. I thought you wanted to ruin me. But after months of struggling, I started to realize something. You were right. I'd built a life that looked perfect, but wasn't mine. I depended on your safety net without even realizing it. When the pressure hit, Melissa and I fought. A lot. She said I should ask you for help. I refused, not because of pride, but because I wanted to fix it myself for once. We sold the house, paid off the loan. We're moving into a smaller place now. It hurts, but it's freeing. I guess I just want to say thank you. And I'm sorry. Daniel, I read that letter a dozen times. Each word was heavy but honest. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from something gentler. Relief, closure, a mother's quiet victory. That night, I called him. He picked up after the first ring. Mom, hi, sweetheart. My voice trembled. I got your letter. There was a pause. Then he whispered, I didn't think you'd call. I wasn't sure I should, I said softly. But you're still my son. And it's Easter this week. Maybe we can start new. He laughed. That same boyish laugh I hadn't heard in years. I'd like that. We met that Sunday. Not in his big fancy house, but in a small 2-bedroom apartment with mismatched furniture and peeling paint. A place that actually felt real. He hugged me at the door. No words, just a long, shaking embrace. I missed you, he said into my shoulder. I missed you more, I whispered. We spent the day cooking together, spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing fancy. He told me about how hard it was to downsize, how he'd learned to budget, how Melissa had started freelancing to help. And for the first time, when he spoke, there was humility, growth, gratitude. When I got up to leave, he handed me a small box. What's this? Open it, he said. Inside was a silver charm bracelet, simple but beautiful. The first charm was a little house. He smiled shyly, for helping me find home. Even when I lost it, I blinked back tears. Daniel, he shook his head. No speeches. Just thank you, Mom. As I drove home that evening, the sun was setting, soft pink light spilling over the hills. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel forgotten. Because sometimes a mother's love isn't about holding on. It's about letting go, just enough for your child to find their way back. It had been nearly a year since Daniel's letter. Life was calm again. We weren't the same as before, maybe we never would be, but our conversations had softened. There was no more edge in his tone, no resentment hiding between words. We talked once a week now, sometimes about work, sometimes about life, and sometimes about nothing in particular. Just a son checking in on his mom, the way it used to be before everything got so complicated. And for me, that was enough. Until one evening, I got a call that would change everything again. It was Daniel, but this time his voice wasn't calm. It was trembling. Mom, he said, barely holding himself together. Melissa's in the hospital. My heart stopped. What happened? She collapsed at work. They said something about internal bleeding. They're still running tests. I'm on my way. Hospitals have a smell, antiseptic and fear mixed together. When I arrived, Daniel was pacing the hallway like a ghost. His hands were shaking, his eyes bloodshot. He turned when he saw me, and in that moment, all the walls between us fell. He stepped forward, and I wrapped my arms around him like I used to when he was a little boy who scraped his knee. She's in surgery, he whispered against my shoulder. They think it might be a ruptured ulcer. Okay, I said softly. Then we'll wait together. We sat side by side for hours. He told me how Melissa had been under stress, long work hours, bills piling up, exhaustion creeping in. She never told me how bad it was, he said, rubbing his temples. I thought she was just tired. God, Mom, I should have seen it. I squeezed his hand. You can't fix everything, Daniel. Sometimes people break quietly. He nodded, tears brimming. Like I did. The words hit me, simple, raw, true. He wasn't just talking about himself. He was talking about me, too. About all the hurt we'd both carried for too long. When the doctor finally came out and said she'd made it through surgery, Daniel broke down completely. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. He just cried into my shoulder while I held him, whispering the same words I had when he was a child. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. Melissa's recovery was slow. I started visiting the hospital every day, bringing homemade soup and fresh fruit. Sometimes Daniel was there, sometimes he wasn't. One afternoon, while she was dozing off, I sat by her bed and looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who'd once been too proud to take my advice now looked fragile, pale, human. When she opened her eyes and saw me, she smiled weakly. You didn't have to come. I wanted to, I said. She swallowed hard. I was awful to you. I know that now. I didn't speak, just waited. I thought you were controlling, that you wanted Daniel all to yourself. But I was wrong. You just wanted him to be happy. I reached out and touched her hand gently. Sometimes love looks like interference from the outside. But I never wanted to replace you, Melissa. I just wanted my son to have a good life. She blinked away tears. He does. Because of you. I smiled faintly. No, because of him. I only taught him how to stand up. He's the one who learned how to walk. When she came home weeks later, Daniel called and asked if I could help around the house while she recovered. It felt strange at first, stepping back into their world after everything that had happened. But this time there was no pretense, no trying to impress. Melissa and I found a rhythm. She'd sit on the couch while I cooked, and we'd talk about little things, TV shows, recipes, the garden I used to tend. Sometimes she'd share small confessions. I used to hate when Daniel called you every Sunday, she admitted one afternoon. It made me feel like he loved you more than me. I chuckled softly. And now, she smiled. Now I get it. You're the calm in his storm. As the months passed, life began to settle again. Daniel was more patient, more grounded. He even took me to lunch one afternoon. His idea this time. Mom, he said as we sat in a small diner, I've been thinking about everything that happened. About the mortgage, about Christmas, about how I treated you. I stirred my coffee quietly. It's behind us, Daniel. He shook his head. No, it's not. You were right to pull your support. You forced me to see how much I was taking for granted. And I think I finally understand why you did it. Why is that? He smiled gently. Because sometimes love needs to hurt a little to heal, right? I looked at him, proud and heartbroken all at once. You've grown up, I said softly. Guess it only took me 33 years, he said, laughing through his tears. That Christmas, a year after he'd shut me out, Daniel called and asked me to come over early. I hesitated. My heart ached at the memory of last Christmas, of the empty chair, the untouched food, the lonely silence. But something in his voice told me it was different this time. When I arrived, the house looked beautiful. Lights twinkled around the porch, and soft music played inside. Daniel met me at the door, grinning ear to ear. Welcome home, Mom. Home. That word. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed hearing it. He led me into the living room, and there it was, a beautifully decorated tree, gifts underneath, and one large, neatly wrapped box placed right in front. Go ahead, he said, motioning to it. I opened it slowly, and inside was a framed photo. It was years ago, me, Daniel, and his father, laughing in the backyard with a snowman between us. Below it, a brass plate engraved with the words, for the woman who taught me everything about love, even the hard parts. My vision blurred instantly. Oh, Daniel, he took my hands. I never should have made you feel forgotten. You're the reason I can love it all. Tears streamed down my face as he hugged me, tight, unashamed, real. Melissa came over, too, resting her hand on my shoulder. This year, she said softly, we saved you a seat at the table first. I laughed through the tears. Then it'll be the best Christmas yet. That night, after dinner, as we sat around the fireplace, Daniel told me something that stayed with me forever. You know, Mom, he said, staring into the flames, when you canceled that mortgage, I thought you were destroying my life, but you were saving it. You saved my marriage, my confidence, and my relationship with you. I just couldn't see it then. I looked at him, my heart full. I didn't want revenge, Daniel. I wanted peace. But I had to teach you that peace isn't free, it's earned. He nodded slowly, and I'm still earning it. When I left that night, the sky was full of stars, bright and cold, the kind of winter night that makes the world feel still. I sat in my car for a moment, looking back at the house. Through the window, I could see them, Daniel and Melissa, cleaning up, laughing quietly together. It wasn't perfect. Life never is. But it was honest. And that was more than enough. As I started the engine, I smiled to myself. Some debts are measured in dollars, others in forgiveness. And as for me, I had finally settled both. 3 years passed after that peaceful Christmas. Seasons came and went like soft sighs, and life finally began to feel gentle again. Daniel and Melissa had a baby boy, little Noah, and suddenly the quiet halls of my home were filled with giggles, toy cars, and the patter of tiny feet. Every Friday, they'd visit for dinner. Daniel would bring takeout, Melissa would bring dessert, and Noah would bring sunshine. Those evenings became the highlight of my week, the kind of joy I thought I'd lost forever. But happiness, I learned, is never permanent, it's borrowed time. And sometimes the bill comes due. One evening in early November, Daniel arrived alone. He looked different, older, worn, his smile tight around the edges. "Melissa's putting Noah to bed," he said quietly, stepping inside. "I just needed to talk." I set down the teapot. "You sound serious. What's going on?" He hesitated, rubbing his palms together. "Things at the company aren't good, Mom. Sales are down. They're laying off managers next month." My stomach dropped. "Daniel, are you?" He nodded. "One of them, yeah." He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. I thought I had everything figured out. Mortgage, car, daycare, we were doing fine. But now he laughed bitterly. "Now I'm back where I was before. Only this time, I've got a family depending on me." I placed a hand on his arm. "You'll find something. You always do." He shook his head. "Not fast enough. We're 3 payments behind already. I'm scared, Mom. I don't want to lose the house." I wanted to help. My heart screamed too. But I also remembered how quickly help can turn into control, and how fragile trust is once it's broken. So I took a breath and said softly, "Daniel, I can guide you. I can't fix it for you." He looked up, eyes wet. "Even now?" "Especially now," I said, "because I trust that you've learned what I tried to teach you. Not to depend, but to decide." He nodded slowly, but the pain in his face broke me inside. Days passed. I prayed for him, worried for him, and tried not to intervene. But as a mother, silence can be its own torment. Then one morning, I received a call from the same bank I used to work for. "Mrs. Parker," the voice said, "we wanted to confirm your authorization for the early settlement inquiry on the mortgage connected to Daniel Parker." My heart froze. "I didn't authorize anything." "Oh," the woman said. "It was requested by someone under your old credentials. The signature matches." I hung up, trembling. My old signature. My authorization. Someone was trying to access Daniel's mortgage files through my name. There was only one person who could have known enough to do that. Patricia. I drove straight to Daniel's house. Melissa opened the door, surprised. "Mom, what's wrong? Where's Patricia?" I asked. She hesitated. "She's in the living room." Patricia turned when I entered, as if she'd been expecting me. "Well," she said smoothly, "I suppose you found out." I stared at her. "You used my credentials to access the mortgage files." She didn't even flinch. "Daniel needs help. I have resources. I was going to refinance under my name. Your name just made the process faster." My hands clenched at my sides. "That's fraud. It's survival," she snapped. "You think letting him drown is noble? You're so proud of your little life lessons, but sometimes pride ruins families." Melissa looked between us, horrified. "Mom, you didn't." Patricia lifted her chin. "I did what needed to be done." Daniel walked in, having heard the commotion. His face drained of color. "You what?" "I saved your home," she cried, "while your mother sat on her throne of morality, doing nothing." Daniel turned to me, eyes wide. "Mom, tell me this isn't true." I took a deep breath. "I didn't do it, Daniel." But she used my name to try. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. "I can't believe this. I thought we were past all this control." Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. "Daniel," he raised his hand. "No, you both need to stop trying to save me. I don't need rescuing. I need space." He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. That night, I sat in my car outside his house for almost an hour. The lights went off one by one. I could see Noah's nightlight glowing faintly through the window, a soft blue star. I whispered to the dark, "Please, God, don't let this break him again." The next day, Daniel called. "Mom, I'm sorry for what happened. I know it wasn't you. Are you okay?" I asked. "Not really, but I'm thinking clearer now. Patricia's leaving for a while, and I talked to the bank. They said there's one option, a hardship settlement. I can liquidate assets and keep the house. I hesitated. That's a big decision. I know, he said, but I'm ready to face it. No more shortcuts. A month later, Daniel sold his car, downsized, and picked up part-time consulting work. He struggled, but he stood on his own. One evening, he came over with Noah asleep in his arms. I wanted to show you something, he said. He handed me a small folder. Inside was a letter from the bank, final mortgage payment received. I looked at him in shock. You paid it off? He smiled through tears. Every cent. The house is finally ours. I hugged him tightly, unable to speak. He whispered, you were right, Mom. You can't fix people by saving them. You fix them by trusting they can survive the fall. I pulled back and smiled. You did more than survive, Daniel. You grew. Years later, when I grew old and my hands trembled too much to pour tea, Daniel and Melissa moved me into their guest house. One snowy morning, years after that first painful Christmas, I woke up to the sound of laughter outside. Noah, now a teenager, was helping his father hang Christmas lights. I stepped outside, bundled in my shawl. You too need a foreman? Daniel grinned. Always. As I stood watching them, Melissa came out with cocoa. Mom, she said softly, I never thanked you. For what? I asked. For teaching Daniel what love really looks like. I used to think you were harsh. Now I see you were brave. I smiled faintly. Bravery is just fear. Walk through slowly. That night, the whole family gathered for dinner. 3 generations around one table. Daniel raised his glass. To lessons learned, debts paid, and forgiveness, the kind that doesn't cancel, but completes. Everyone clinked glasses. Even Patricia, now quieter, softer, older, is sitting beside me with tears in her eyes. When dessert came, Noah slid a small gift across the table. This is for you, Grandma. I unwrapped it, a silver frame, holding a photo of Daniel and me on that long-ago Christmas morning, the day we started again. Underneath, engraved in small letters, were the words, "Forgiveness is the mortgage of the soul. Once paid, you own peace." I smiled, tears blurring my vision. Daniel leaned over, whispering, I finally understand, Mom. You didn't cancel my mortgage to punish me. You did it to remind me who I was. I touched his cheek. And who are you now? He smiled, a man who finally knows the value of home. That night, as I lay in bed, the house silent around me, I looked at that framed photo on my nightstand. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a mother waiting to be needed. I felt like a woman who had completed her circle, who had learned that love, when tested by time and pride and pain, still finds its way home. The kind of revenge that isn't about breaking hearts, but mending them one truth at a time. And as the snow fell softly outside my window, I whispered to the night, Merry Christmas, Daniel. You paid your debt in full.
Like, subscribe, and comment below this video for the next story.